I wanted to watch this debate between Joe Biden supporter Destiny and Donald Trump supporter Sebastian Gorka on trigonometry. They got like a centristy debate moderator to host this conversation as they went back and forth. I heard they debated Ukraine. I heard they debated January 6th. I heard they debated all sorts of stuff. As you can see down here, is Trump really a man of the people? Immigration. Why was the wall built? Can Trump get things done? Could Biden diffuse global tension? How Trump would restore peace? Come on. Anyway, I want to check this out because Destiny seems to be climbing up the debate ladder more and more and more. And we got this internet debate guy throwing down with Sebastian Gorka, who I don't know if this is a statement to how much Sebastian Gorka has come down, how much Destiny has come up, or if it's a combination of both. But now we got StarCraft players debating some of the biggest name in conservative commentary as of just 6, 7, 8 years ago. Sebastian Gorka was pretty big. I mean, I don't hear about him much anymore, but he's still a known name in conservative media. So this is notable. This is a notable back and forth. And so I wanted to give it the attention that I think it deserves. Let's check it out. Oh, I don't want to make any predictions besides one. Sebastian Gorka will be extremely smarmy, and he will act better than the person he is talking to, especially due to Destiny's non-formal background in politics. That's my only prediction. Hopefully I'm wrong.
Every part of Donald Trump's foreign policy, it was a disaster. I would
He's
look
out
that
of his
up.
depth. He's out of his depth.
Out of my depth? Okay. The analysis is childlike to defend Trump, right? Well, there were no wars, right? Wars don't just come out of nowhere. There's a buildup for how these things happen.
So what he just did is he said the conditions for the largest slaughter of Jews since 19...
Oh my God. I don't need to hear the introduction. Just get me to the debate.
Pretty good.
I think the Biden is a good...
About January the 6th and everything that happened around that.
Right.
Do you believe that
failed to steal...
one of the things we agreed before is that both of you get a chance to set out a positive case for your candidate, something that we never hear anymore because everyone just criticizes the other person. So given that Biden is the incumbent, Stephen, do you want to start us off?
Yeah.
Why is he good?
I think that Biden is a good president because I think that he's shown that he's willing to defend and strengthen our institutions.
Is Biden a good president relative to other American presidents? I think he's okay. Relative to what we could have, I think he's more than fine. Relative to what I would personally want, I'd rank him much, much lower. But I also understand that the world is as I find it, and you can fight, you can scream, you can jump, you can stomp. But the thing about the truth is it stays the truth. And so the truth of the situation is as it is. And so we got to get the best situation given the circumstances that we can get. And as the options are Donald Trump and Joe Biden, I'm going with the guy who was president for the last 4 years. I'm going with the guy who hasn't called for suspension of the U.S. Constitution. I'm going for the guy who actually wants to support the commitments we've made on the international stage, like supporting the Ukrainians. It isn't floppy or slowing down the aid process, costing lives in the process. I don't want to go with the guy who is openly questioning whether or not we should keep around our democratic institutions that help keep checks on the president, like the checks and balances, allowing the judicial system to keep a check on the president instead of, as Trump wants it, the president can do whatever he wants, no matter the legality, because he is the president and it's legal because the president did it, which would remove all checks and balances from the same person who also called for the suspension of the U.S. Constitution and wants to replace basically the entirety of the bureaucratic state with his own loyalists. And so I don't want to be a fearmonger, but if these are the things he wants to do, even if we have guardrails that helped stop him last time, if he's figuring out the guardrails as we speak, the last thing I want to do is give him another whack at it. But I don't want to base it too much in Trump doing bad things. I also want to talk about some of the good things. I would say Biden, doing the child tax credit, when we did have it, it helped cut child poverty in half, and they want to reintroduce it. I'm a supporter of that. Lowering the scheduling status of marijuana is something I'm supportive of. I wish he would go further towards legalization in all 50 states. The majority of American states are now in favor of legalization. This would be the point where we would need somebody on the federal level to pick up the mantle and charge. It's popular. It's popular. It's popular. I think that another big victory was the infrastructure deal. I think another big victory was the CHIPS Act. That's definitely manufacturing we want inside the United States. Another big victory was recent microchip manufacturing investments that we've gotten agreed to with gigantic Taiwanese manufacturing companies. I mean, there are victories that I can point to with Joe Biden that I didn't expect while he was president. Because to be quite frank, I didn't have a high expectation of Joe Biden as being somebody who's more from the progressive wing of the party. And I also understood that we're going in there with a very slim majority, but he was able to get stuff done that I didn't expect. Not everything I wanted. He didn't, I think, stomp enough on public options, something that he talked about a lot on the campaign trail. And it's something that I think is at least a step in the right direction, if not the end result. But I don't want to talk about this too much. Let's get into the debate. It's going to be a long conversation.
I think that the United States is only...
Also, that doesn't mean I don't have problems with Biden. It's just all the problems I could bring up with Biden. Like, I don't think he's pressuring Israel enough. Like, I'm not going to bring up Donald Trump as a counterference to that, because Donald Trump's main position on how to fight a war humanely is target the families. That was his statement about how to fight terrorism. It's blow up their families. So I don't think I can really switch my critique from a Trumpian or a MAGA angle.
As strong as the institutions that we have. You can have parchment guarantees from constitutions that say you're afforded XYZ rights, or, you know, you're guaranteed in the United States to be able to do some particular things. But at the end of the day, if we don't have a government telling you that the food is safe, or this medicine is safe, or your car is not going to explode at the end of the day, I think that none of those things actually matter, the parchment guarantees. So I think that Biden has done a really good job at kind of reaffirming our institutions, whereas I feel like Trump was a bit more negative towards them. The second thing is, I think Biden has done a really good job at being able to actually bring different people in Congress together to pass legislation. I think that bipartisanship is really important right now, considering how divided we are. You've got things that Trump said about infrastructure for 4 years that never got done. The closest we got to infrastructure building in the United States under Trump are tariffs, which are basically just taxes on our own citizens, whereas Biden was able to pass the IRA and the CHIPS Act, which both have like fostered a ton of new manufacturing that's been happening in the United States, which I think is really cool because we're finally building stuff again. And then I think that the foreign policy under Biden, I think that our aims right now are a lot more noble than they were under Trump. I think that regardless of your feelings, our participation with supporting Ukraine against Russia or supporting Israel against the situation in the Middle East is a lot more defensible than endless drone wars that we're trying to hide in Yemen, you know, fighting in Syria, whatever other, you know, the photo opportunity.
What do you mean fighting in Syria? Does Destiny not support Operation Inherent Resolve against ISIS? I mean, I think it's probably one of the least objectable military operations in American Middle Eastern history was our operation against ISIS in Syria. So I don't know what he means by that. Maybe he means Operation Timber Sycamore and the funneling of certain weapons to rebel groups to try to keep them in the fight, but not giving them enough to actually win because we wanted Assad to do a settlement, which is also the same mistake that we made when it came to Ukraine, trying to seek a settlement with Yanukovych, just trying to middle ground it, trying to balance it out. I don't know what Destiny means by Syria. I assume he means Operation Timber Sycamore and not Operation Inherent Resolve, because I don't know why he would not want to fight ISIS.
Opportunities with North Korea, the back and forth with Iran, whatever kind of like mixed bag of undermining the United States Trump was involved in when it came to U.S. foreign policy under him. So those would be my three big ones. I think defensive institutions, ability to bipartisanly pass legislation, and then more noble foreign policy aims.
Perfect. I will come back to you to probe at some of those things. Seb, what's your case for Trump?
He loves America.
I don't know if I'd ever use the word noble when it comes to like a foreign policy aim, because like foreign policy aims are so like there's financial aims, there's ideological aims, there's moral aims, there's self-interested. There's so many different aims when it comes to any country supporting one or the other side in a war, especially one as complicated as a war in Ukraine. Is I don't like using the word noble. really, when it comes to foreign policy, too much. I think that there are some noble aspects of foreign policy, or some noble aspects of why you might support one side over another, but I try to stay away from those words. It's like, it feels like a little fanciful, a little like you're adding a lot of moral weight to yourself that isn't necessarily deserved.
Of like mixed bag of undermining the
But I understand that he's talking to like a general audience, so it's like whatever.
Syria, whatever other, the photo opportunities with North Korea, the back and forth with Iran, whatever kind of like mixed bag of undermining the United States Trump was involved in when it came to U.S. foreign policy under him. So those would be my three big ones. I think defensive institutions, ability to bipartisanly pass legislation, and then more noble foreign policy aims.
Perfect. I will come back to you to probe at some of those things. Seb, what's your case for Trump?
He loves America. He doesn't hate America. It's really that simple. And
my goodness, is that all it takes to be president? Is loving America? Because from the way that I listen to Trump speak about America, America's on fire, it's collapsing, it's destroyed. Our country is dead, it is dying. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure maybe he's like screaming in grief and agony at the destruction of America. I mean, I will say that if you're president and then you leave the presidency and the country starts immediately collapsing upon your exit, it doesn't sound like you made the type of durable, long-standing change that an administration would want to see after their term was complete. But nevertheless,
he understands the institutions are either broken or corrupt. And he's not a member of the political elite. He wasn't in politics for 47 years like the current incumbent in the White House. He is not part of the quote-unquote political elite that clearly detests our nation and Judeo-Christian civilization.
Okay, so there's two things. Is he part of the political elite? He had the political elite come to his parties. He's always wanted to be part of the political elite. He is now the former president of the United States, getting backed by tons and tons and tons of dark money groups. He is part of the political elite now. Just because he wasn't part of the political elite before 2016, outside of a fundraising aspect and him whining and dining with the top of political society, doesn't mean he's now not part of the political elite. Like, he's part of a different class of the political elite, a different grouping within the political elite. He just serves a different political elite. Because if not, then I don't know why all these natural gas and oil companies would be giving him money. I don't know why all these lobby groups would be giving him money. If he was simply the one man standing against the political elite, then all of these institutions would not be giving money to both Trump and Biden. They'd be giving money to just Biden. Trump wouldn't be getting any money, and he wouldn't be trying to seek funds or assistance from people who are in bed with, say, TikTok. For example, Donald Trump was a big proponent of a TikTok ban. He wanted to ban TikTok. He wanted to show himself tough on the Chinese. Then, when somebody who had invested a sizable pretty penny, who also was a Trump ally, had a conversation with Donald Trump, backed by a little green, wouldn't you know it, all of a sudden, after that meeting, Donald Trump comes out, and from somebody who had supported a TikTok ban for well over a year, he 180'd overnight against the ban, right after the meeting was concluded. I mean, so when people talk about he's not part of the political elite, you could say he's not part of the common American bureaucracy. He's not part of the same clique as someone like, say Joe Biden or a Nancy Pelosi, a Chuck Schumer, a Mitch McConnell. Like, he's not part of these same cliques. You could say that. But when he says not part of the political elite, it sounds like he's just like Joe Schmo coming up with a hole in his sock to be president of the United States. Mr. Smith goes to Washington.
There's a reason that working class Americans from across the nation voted for him in 2016. There's a reason that recently in Harlem, we saw what? We saw a black 10-year-old child chant out, "We love you, Trump," which was then picked up by all the adults around that young boy because they see in that man authenticity. He's not a...
I had to say, I couldn't care less. Like, there was a black child who said, "Let's go Trump." That shows that the working class supports Trump. Is this the standard we're at? This is what we've reduced ourselves to? were just falling for like the type of shit that like Stalin simps would have fallen for. Oh my God, I just saw this film that said Slava Stalin. And everybody was like, whoa. And like he beat it was amazing. He was great. He beat back the fat. It was like, come on. Like maybe the kid was genuine, maybe the kid wasn't. But this is not a gauge on like support for working class people for Donald Trump. An actual gauge would be like maybe some polling data, maybe like certain like information you could get from people's voting intention. You know, it would be something that's demonstratable, that's not just a single child. Because if your standard is I found a little boy that thinks that my candidate's better than your candidate, then congratulations, a child agrees with you.
Machine career politician. He's not somebody with 21 shell companies funneling money from communist China, Russia, the
By the way, Trump 100% has shell companies.
Ukraine, into his son's dodgy dealings, and then into the Biden family. He has authenticity and he loves America. The first time I met him, I've told this story on your show.
Also, didn't the Saudi Foreign Wealth Fund give $2 billion to his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, after he was Middle East peace envoy?
Previously, I grew up in
after the board overruled giving them the money because they said it was a not wise investment, and so then the Crown Prince got involved and overruled the board.
UK. It was a very different culture for me to meet this reality TV star in his, golden tower in New York. But within 30 seconds of sitting down with this man, I realized two things. He loves America and he hates political correctness. That is the antithesis of the political class, whether it's rhino fake Republicans or the institutionalized Democrats. And that's why he's trouncing Biden in every significant poll in America. People see...
That's also not true. Polling data right now is really mixed. Some has Biden up like by 4 points. Others have Biden down by 2 points. I don't know, man. It's all over the place.
A man who understands...
I'm sure, you know what? Let me put it this way. All the polls that I agree with have Biden winning, and all the polls that I disagree with have Trump losing. And I'm sure if you were to ask Sebastian Gorka, he would say the same.
America has lost its way. The elite on both sides of the aisle have betrayed especially American workers, and we need to fix it. That's why.
And so that's why you picked Donald Trump, is because Trump's going to fight for them against the elites. Like the only promises Trump actually made to the working class that were purely like economic working class issues. For example, the leave, the paid time off for mothers who had given birth, having mandatory paid time off on the federal level. That was something that Hillary Clinton announced she was in favor of in 2016. And so Trump, in response to that, announced he was in favor of it too, just on a smaller scale. He never even attempted to implement it while he was in office. And there's a ton of policies like that that he made commitments to that he immediately dropped because they were not things that his donors, or even particularly himself, that he wanted. Now, I'm sure you could find tax cuts, and we can debate them like minutia if those tax cuts really help the working class people. But when it came to specifically working regulations like that, completely ignored it. And the Donald Trump NLRB was absolutely dog doo-doo. And if you talk to different unions, whether it's SEIU or other ones like, I don't know, UAW, about what the Donald Trump NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board, was like during the first Trump term, it was not cooperative. It was a do-nothing agency, and he put a union buster to be put in charge of it. It's this age-old practice of people who don't believe an institution should exist simply appointing somebody to be in head of that institution who also doesn't believe it should exist. Therefore, they run it like it doesn't exist.
And is it really true that like the Biden and the people around him hate America? I mean, isn't that an extraordinary claim to make, Seb?
It is. It's kind of perverse, but if you look at everything they've done for the last 3.5 years, answer the question thusly. What else would you do for 3.5 years if your ostensible goal was actually to destroy America? What would you do differently? Nothing.
I think the first thing I would do is try to bring back the gold standard, because I'd get all the dumbest people cheering for me, while all of the economists would immediately start ripping out their hair. I would probably, from there, I would announce $10 million to every American From there, I would probably go on national television and say that India and Pakistan are both wrong. Kashmir belongs to California, before moving troops across the Korean Peninsula. I mean, there's a million things you could do. If you really want to destroy America, there's a lot of things you could do to destroy America. Under this standard, I could easily say Trump hates America. If you wanted to destroy America, you would say things like Rocket Man. You would ignore something like COVID. You would encourage rioters and do nothing during January 6th. Like, this is just dumb performative nonsense. Like, I don't really care if Trump loves America. I don't really care if Biden loves America in the sense that he's talking about they love America. I'm sure if you ask both of them, they love America, just probably in very different ways. And like, I mean, even Trump, I would imagine he loves America. He just loves, I think, the America that's really more a kind of a squeaky clean image to reflect his own face upon.
You'd open the borders. You'd give billions of dollars to the greatest state-sponsored terrorism in the world, Iran, that every Friday chants death to America. You'd undermine our relationship with our closest ally in the Middle East. Is
tens of billions of dollars to the Iranians. I think he might be talking about the unfreezing of Iranian assets from before the Iranian Revolution, in order to get certain deal. I mean, I would have to go back and check, but I think he's referring to the unfreezing of assets. He's making it sound like we just gave them like American tax dollars, but I believe he's referring to the unfreezing of Iranian assets in order to get certain deal with the Iranians, getting certain deals done with the Iranians.
Israel stop sending them the weapons they need to save themselves from the bloodthirsty jihadists that killed more Jews than we've ever seen since the end of the show at the end of the Holocaust.
Can I just throw out there, if that's the case, that not sending weapons to Israel is an attempt to is a display of hatred of America, then did Ronald Reagan hate America when he stopped sending the Israelis F-16s after their invasion of southern Lebanon? Did Ronald Reagan hate America? That'd be my question for Gorka.
You'd make it harder for Americans to live their lives. When on the first day of the Biden administration, you ban the XL Keystone Pipeline extension. You say no more fracking, no more energy exploration on federal lands. And what do we have? We go from $1.80 a gallon of petrol to now we have in California $6. When you're a man who lives on how much it costs to put a full tank of gas in your car, if you're a worker, if you're a plumber.
Gas prices have been going down all year, and they'll continue to go down all year.
If you're a carpenter, you've crushed tens of millions of people. That is only possible if you hate the nation in which you live.
The idea that gas prices only go up because of hatred of your own country is so just knuckle draggy. I don't even know how to really respond to it. Like, you only let in a disease like COVID into your country if you want everyone to die. Like, this is stupid. This is childish.
Think of this thing. It's set up by one person. Don't listen to me. Don't listen to Sebastian. Listen to Biden's former boss. 5 days before he became president, he said, "We are going to fundamentally change this nation." I know you're a married man, Konstantin. Mm-hmm. Don't tell your wife you want to fundamentally change her because she won't believe you love her. You'll be on the couch or in the doghouse, okay? You don't love that which you wish to.
You don't love that which you wish to fundamentally change? Okay, so then Abraham Lincoln didn't love America because he wanted to make changes to it. Martin Luther King didn't truly love America because he wanted to make fundamental changes to it. There's so many different reformers and activists and labor rights fighters and so many different people who believed there had to be fundamental changes. The founders of our country, after the country was founded, made fundamental changes to how our government worked after the Farmers Rebellion. Are we going to say that Benjamin Franklin hated this country? Are we going to say that the founders hated this country? It depends on what those changes are, and if those changes would mean making America not what people love about America, but making it into something totally different. And I haven't heard of anything around Joe Biden saying we're going to get rid of the First Amendment, or we're going to we're going to ban freedom of travel, or we're going to make it so we're not bringing in immigrants anymore. We're just native born. We're just for native born people now. Like, I haven't heard anything like that. Now, I'm sure there's policies that you don't agree with, but the idea that fundamental change to the country means he doesn't love it. Shut up. Come on.
Fundamentally change. And that's what the left has become.
Well, there you go. I'm getting marital advice as well. Stephen, there's quite a lot there. I'm going to come back to some of the points you.
Flemmy gifted 9 tier 1 subscriptions.
Hey.
Can't watch RN, but related to that ICC thing. Your plane tickets to Jerusalem are in hiding spot Sigma 3. Activation phrase Bluebird.
Bluebird, 8989, 1973. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you for gifting a tier 1 sub to Mazur Gazer 423, Progressive Potato, Enoshoy, Kamasuru, Trajan, James WJ, Nesties, Cool Scene, and Rockefeller. Thank you for the 9 gifted tier 1s. I appreciate it. We're getting some good support from chat today, considering all the technical issues and the blackouts in Kiev. I do appreciate it.
Made in your opening, and let Seb probe them as well, but there was a lot there. Do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I mean, I disagree with almost every part. I think that I don't think Trump loves America. I think it's pretty obvious that Trump loves himself. I think even Trump fans will admit that Trump is more in love with himself than any other individual entity.
I mean, it's the thing is, like, I would not say that Trump doesn't. I wouldn't say Trump doesn't love America. I would just say Trump loves the image of America that is reflected in him, which I think is a lot of the aspects of America that I don't like.
That exists on this planet. I always think it's really funny. I think one of the most interesting things that happened with conservatives is this idea that they found a common man who's not a part of the elite to champion their causes, and it happens to be a billionaire real estate mogul from New York City that was essentially born with a silver spoon. I think that's incredibly interesting. When you talk about, like, I mean, we could go into family stuff. I think it's interesting that people are so critical about Hunter Biden when Kushner is signing multi-billion-dollar deals with Saudi Arabia. When Kushner,
well, not just Saudi Arabia, the UAE and Qatar as well,
was working in.
Hold on, but that's whataboutism, right? That's not like Hunter Biden could be a bad guy and Jared Kushner could be doing whatever you say he's doing. Those are not.
Sure, I'm not. It's not a whataboutism because it's not a defense of Hunter. I think it's more remarking that it's interesting what conservatives that are fans of Trump are selectively skeptical of. That if Biden had created a position in the White House for his son Hunter to work under, and then he had sent his son to go and negotiate on behalf of the United States, and then afterwards his son was signing multi-billion-dollar deals for companies that he worked with, this is like Burisma, but 100 million times worse because it's in the official capacity as a government worker while being related to a president who didn't divest.
I guess all I'm saying. Sorry to interject. I really want you to get the time. But I just that argument could be played the other way. If Donald Trump had a son like Hunter Biden who was doing what Hunter Biden did, everyone on the left would be outraged too, right?
I mean, honestly, if I'm being for real with you, I don't see anything that Hunter Biden did that Donald Trump's children either would not do or would not do worse of, or haven't already done worse examples of. So I don't really think if Donald Trump's children did everything that Hunter Biden did, including the crack, including the including the wild parties, that it would change that much. I mean, Donald Trump himself is on trial right now for paying hush money to a porn star to keep quiet, possibly with the use of funds allocated to the campaign. And that is having what impact? So I don't know.
Right, so
you don't really hear many people on the left talking about Kushner that much, considering how crazy those deals are.
I mean, people have talked about it less. It's true.
Sure. Anyway, for Hunter Biden, I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene has pictures of him in Congress. I don't know if you saw that. In terms of, like, what would you do if you wanted to make the country worse? I mean, I can think of several things. I would encourage my supporters to lead an insurrection on the Capitol. I would try to say that the election results weren't real. I would claim that the election was fake before even coming into office, which he did. I would, if I genuinely wanted to cause damage to the country, I would say it's rigged unless I win. That is something that I would say does create genuine distrust in your institutions that can be passed down through time, which also creates not only a chance of people being less willing to interact and like participate in the democratic process, but also being more willing, if they think it isn't genuine, if you believe a genuine dictatorship has come to the lands, to take
other means outside of democratic levers and tools in order to try to enforce their demands and desires.
Before his first term.
Almost like what happened on January 6th.
I'd probably start to gain notoriety or popularity in the political world by suggesting that the current president was born in Kenya, not the United States. A lot of people forget, but that's how Trump initially picked up his popularity. It was with the birth certificate stuff with Barack Obama. I think that when you talk about like wanting to fundamentally change this country, I don't think Biden wants to do that. I think Biden genuinely loves the United States. I look at somebody like Donald Trump, who undermines basically every single part of this country, whether it's the legal and judicial system.
I don't know if that's a smart move by Destiny to go into. I don't think Biden wants to fundamentally change it. If he says he wants to fundamentally change it, then all Sebastian Gorka has to say is, okay, then why did he say he wanted to fundamentally change it? The statement would be, the things he wants to fundamentally change is to make it so that the promises America are delivered on when it comes to all men are created equal, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That would, I think, be the better angle to go on than, no, he doesn't want to fundamentally change anything. Because if he said he wants to fundamentally change something, then it's your word against Biden's on what's Biden's desire.
It's trust in the voting process, whether it's NATO, whether it's U.S. Impressions or the U.S. reputation abroad. I think that Trump fundamentally has no respect for any part of this country. That's why he suggested suspending the Constitution so that he could look for voter fraud. It's why before getting elected, he said that people that burn the flag are one of our most important First Amendment protected rights, should have their citizenship stripped from them, which is insane. And I would also probably try to undermine the current sitting president and the current sitting Congress by telling them that they're not allowed to get things done on the border, because if we keep that as a real problem, it'll help me in the next election cycle, which is why we weren't able to pass any bipartisan border legislation to actually fix the asylum problem that we have.
That was a big contributing factor, and many Republicans are very open about that, including one of the main negotiators for the deal on the Republican side, Senator from Oklahoma, Senator James Lankford.
Right now, that the current government's hands are tied on.
Ted?
I just, most of that is just absolutely risible. He loves himself more than anything, any other human being on the planet. Yeah, that's why he's facing 730 years in prison right now, because he wants to be president again. He could have just...
Wait, I think almost all of these crimes would still have been crimes committed, even if he wasn't running for re-election. Like, he personally, Donald Trump, advocated for increasing the penalties for violations of the Presidential Records Act. And then he went out and then mishandled those classified records. He made a big arc of his campaign. Like, it was part of his stump speech to go after Hillary Clinton for the improper storage of emails. And then Donald Trump takes a bunch of classified documents, stores it in his bathroom, and when the government comes to knock and say these are not unclassified, what does he do? He hides it from them. Like, this is something that would have been a crime no matter what. Like, if he continued to have those classified documents and hide from the government, he was always going to have his home raided like he did. Like, these are crimes that would have always been crimes whether or not he ran for president again. None of these crimes is you want to be president again. None of them.
Gone off.
The most you could argue is, yes, he paid hush money off to a porn star. Yes, he violated the law when it came to document storage and lied to government officials, including the National Archives, about the storage of those documents. Yes, he committed that crime. Yes, he committed that crime. But the only reason anyone cares is because he's president. But that's also true of all presidents, is that when they're caught in criminality or when they're caught in doing these types of things, is that it's going to get a ton more attention. Why do you think Hunter Biden's gun crimes are getting more attention? Do you think that people usually spend that much time following the truthfulness on these gun forms that you have to fill out in order to get a firearm when it comes to like drug use in the past? I mean, like what happens with the Hunter Biden case there was very rare, and it was only because he had a spotlight on him. Point is, though, the argument here is not about criminality or not about whether Trump committed crimes. Trump committed crimes. The question is whether or not the president should be held accountable for crimes, because if this president is held accountable for crimes, all president should be held accountable to crimes, which is the standard that I would prefer much more than the standard of the president can do whatever the fuck he wants, which is what Donald Trump wants.
back to his private life.
And when I say that's what he wants, I mean that. As in, that's his legal argument in court, is that the president can do whatever he wants because he's president.
730 years in prison right now because he wants to be president again. He could have just gone off back to his private life, running his businesses. But no, he actually said a few days ago, I'm prepared to go to jail and make that sacrifice any day because the Constitution is more important than my freedom. That sounds...
Okay, number one, there is like sacrifices people can make in public service, but can we stop pretending that people are heroes for asking to be the most powerful person on the planet?
Sounds like a very selfish individual, absolutely.
Do you not think, though, I think it's a fair critique to say that Donald Trump is narcissistic, and so he would want to go back because he feels that he was badly treated. The reason he didn't get reelected was...
I mean, Donald Trump tweeted out, can we look at the revenge infographic? Donald Trump revenge tweet, where he showed a bunch of keywords as to why he was running for president again. And the biggest word, here it is, the biggest word he highlighted and he put out there was the word revenge. It was revenge, power, dictatorship. Then you got to economy, then America, then the word nothing, then dictator again. Just saying.
Election was stolen, and he wants to show the world that it's a personal ambition project rather than
at the cost of going to prison.
Well, some people want to sacrifice themselves so everyone can see how they've been badly treated because they're so obsessed with looking.
Look,
right.
I'm glad we're so good at psychoanalyzing people from the outside.
Just saying, that's what a lot of people would think.
But let's look at the facts. He wouldn't be where he is today if he wasn't running again. That's just, we know that.
Yeah, if he didn't commit crimes while, I mean, you could say this about everybody who committed crimes while in office.
This is an attempt to steal an election before any vote is...
Look, if Nixon never ran for president, then he would have never had the Watergate scandal. And we should keep that in mind, that the scandal happened while he was dutifully serving the country while committing crimes.
Whether it's the Fannie Willis corrupt prosecutor in Georgia, whether it's the person...
I do got to be careful about flirting around with Nixon apologia, because I've been seeing a lot of people online engaging in just like straight up Nixon apologia as of recent. Not a lot of people on the right, but some niche communities online.
Ames or Alvin Bragg, funded by George Soros during their campaigns, because sadly we elect these people in America, and who campaigned on putting President Trump in prison. How perverse is that? And with regards to, he did it all for himself, and he did nothing for America or destroyed America. Do you have any idea how much energy...
By the way, I just found out that Putin is traveling by plane to Tehran to attend President Raisi's funeral, and there's never been a chance for God to do a funnier thing right now than at any other point during the last decade. Anyway, continuing.
Costs went up under the Trump administration, just for average families.
The president doesn't influence energy costs that much.
He does when he shuts down fracking and all licenses for oil exploration on federal lands. Don't divert.
U.S. oil production.
Okay, so U.S. oil and natural gas production, I believe, is like at an all-time high right now, like unironically. We've gotten to a point where we're talking about the shipping of liquefied natural gas. We have the export terminals that we keep expanding, where our liquefied natural gas exports are increasing at such a rate where Biden had to cap it, not to permanently cap it, but just to put a pause on construction, because we have some ports, some export terminals being built right now that will literally more than double America's export capacity for liquefied natural gas. That's in construction right now. And there's other companies that want to build even more export terminals. So he had to put a pause on it because he was worried that it could affect America's energy security. We are in an energy boom when it comes to production. An energy boom. when it comes to production. We are producing more energy than any other country on the planet. Energy prices are affected by many things: wars, instability, global conflict. I just basically said 3 things in a row. But point is, like, I don't think you could say that not enough production of natural gas is the problem.
At an all-time high, so that's
Absolutely not true.
It is.
Not true.
It is. We're energy independent right now.
Okay, you're making stuff up. Okay,
People don't.
It's 100% true. It's 100% true. Do we have to get the graphs? Like, America producing more energy now. The U.S. is producing more energy now than ever before. For nuclear and renewables is the amount of electricity generated. United States produces more crude oil than any country ever. U.S. Energy Information Administration. But I'm sure Sebastian Gorka just didn't get his facts straight.
How much did energy go up? Do you know, under Trump?
Are we counting the last year under COVID when the entire world was slowing down?
Over 4 years, how much did energy go up? Do you know?
I'm not sure.
4%. Do you know how much it's gone up in the last 3.5 years under Biden?
I'm not sure.
28%. Who's destroying America?
I'm sorry, it's such a ridiculous. Gorka is such a clown. I don't even know if I can. I don't think I can give him an ounce of my respect. And there's a certain respect you have to give to people for just like being in an industry for a certain long period of time, for like earning skills. It's hard for me to do it when every premise is just Biden destroying America because of bad economic indicator. Biden destroying America because he made a deal with the Iranians. Biden is destroying America because like every single one of these things is destroying America. It's not we're on the wrong path. It's not this is bad for the economy. It's not this is bad for consumers. It's America is burning. It's dying. It's a corpse. It's rotting. And Biden is the man with the bloody hatchet who went to town on old Uncle Sam. It's ridiculous. It's hard for me to take this proposition seriously, and it immediately makes me question how genuine any of these numbers are just because of how unbelievably partisan it is from the get-go. And I understand that, they both support different candidates. It is what it is. But when he starts it so ridiculously, like if I was saying, for example, hey guys, I got a problem with Loner Bucks, okay? Loner Bucks is raping Twitch poll. And I know that because he is holding President Sunday hostage. Now, once I said that second part, President Sunday is raping Twitch poll, Loner Box is raping Twitch poll. It's so far out there. It's so crazy that it's kind of hard to take anything I say after that seriously. And so I kind of want to go Google what Gorka's saying about the energy rates and whether he's taking it from a certain point, because he might have just waited for the energy rate to hit its peak, and then he counted that for Biden, and that didn't include it decreasing. I don't know. It's kind of hard to trust him when he's coming in from that angle.
So, but that's also a global trend. Inflation,
but also
isn't
it's
just
a function of what we created. When we were in the Trump administration, for the first time in our history, we were net exporters of energy. Think about what that does for the lifeblood. An economy requires energy.
Wait, why is it so hard for him to believe that we've never exported more than right now, when he's also acknowledging he understands the recent history of like the expansion in exports? Why does he think that the way it worked when it came to how we exported energy is that we had this graph and it was going up and up and up under Trump, and then Biden gets elected, and then Biden puts a halt to everything, including current production? And so then it stagnates or then begins to go down, and that's what created the energy crisis? Because if that's what he thinks happened, he has no idea what created the energy crisis. Energy demands around the world can have impacts on energy prices within the United States completely outside of our own control. For example, let's say that a major energy producer on the world stage loses the ability to produce energy, either because it's under sanction and cannot sell it, or because of infrastructure breakdown, government collapse, whatever it is. Now, in the United States, we produce the same amount of oil and natural gas. And so a lot of people, and you could even say, as we are now, energy independent. You could throw that word out there. And so some people think what that means is we can control for ourselves what the energy prices are. And so whatever happens out in the world doesn't affect us because we produce more energy than anywhere else in the world. But unless the state directly intervenes and starts taking over the assets of these companies or engages in a lot of hands-on approaches to directly take the product, put it in the hand of the consumer, directly subsidize said product when it comes to like civilian consuming it, like here every individual is going to get like a government gas card, etc. If those producers on the world stage break down, then prices everywhere, including in the United States, will go up, because then American producers will see foreign consumers willing to pay more for less, and they will take advantage, or they will adjust their prices accordingly due to the lost opportunity cost. As in that, hey, if we were selling over there, we'd be making more money, so you got to pay us for the opportunity cost.
I know it's a scary, evil thing for the left, but oil and gas is how you run an economy. It's how you get food to people. So when we became the first time ever a net exporter, or talk about the other aspects of the economy, we had the lowest unemployment for minorities in the United States since record keeping began.
We also have that now. It even went lower under Biden. It's just that it was the lowest at the time under Trump. It's now lower now. But if you leave that part out, then it's like a really impressive statistic. And it would be an impressive statistic against any other politician, except for the other one that's beaten your record. It's like a statistic, a really good Trump statistic that I loved was when he said that he's gotten the most votes of any incumbent president ever, which is true. Donald Trump does have the most votes of any incumbent president ever. But he doesn't have the most votes of any president ever, because that would be the person who beat him, Joe Biden, who beat the incumbent president and became president. So it's an impressive statistic until you include that other piece of information, which kind of takes a little bit of the shine off of it. It also is less impressive when you also include the fact that Donald Trump, despite participating in 2 elections going on his 3rd, has never won the popular vote either.
And the lowest unemployment for women for 70 years. Look at what we have today. I mean, it's absolute. The fact that most families in this...
He says that as if Black and Hispanic unemployment has skyrocketed under Biden, which it hasn't. He says that, and now says, look at what's happened today, as if there's been some change. But there hasn't. The situation for those groups when it comes to unemployment has even improved. Now, some of this you could say is like, oh, it's... people holding 2 jobs, etc. But they're using the same metrics to test it, so it can't be considered a numbers game when comparing the Trump data to the Biden data.
This nation cannot handle a $500 emergency. They don't have $500 worth of cash. That's why Harlem is shouting, "We love you, Trump."
That also was true under the Trump presidency. In fact, I don't even know if that number is necessarily true anymore. I used to quote that number. That number might be out of date, but that number was true because I used to cite it when Trump was president.
I don't know if you saw President Trump after he had to leave the court last week. He delivered pizzas to the firefighters in Manhattan. It's really interesting to watch that video, not just of how he was received by those people who...
By the way, Hassan also delivered pizzas to the Palestinian protesters. So Trump, Hassan, what are some other revolutionaries that we know of we could bring up? The pizza revolution's going on out there.
Run into fires to save Americans. One of the firefighters actually audibly says in the background, "Save us, Mr. Trump." That doesn't happen if the man's selfish and if the economy's absolutely superb.
Number one, it absolutely does. People turn to demagogues in times of desperation and times of economic hardship in order to try to get a savior who can come in and swoop in and save all their issues. There's nothing better than a simple solution through someone's personality.
It happens when you let in 8 million illegals in 3.5 years to crush the working man and woman in America.
Stephen, even as a fair observer, you would have to say, and feel free to come back on the point Seb made as well, but the immigration issue, the illegal immigration issue, seems to be much, much worse under President Biden. Would you agree with that?
Yes, we're facing unique issues right now, yeah.
So why would you want to re-elect a man who has allowed this many illegal immigrants in, despite the fact that I think it's fair to say the vast majority?
I mean, Seven has donated $10. Pizza.
Well, I mean, some of this, if some of this is outside the president's control, then it's a question of how he deals with it, deals with the situation. You cannot like condemn the president of the United States for a meteor like on its way to Earth. You can condemn him for how he responds to the meteor on its way to Earth. Thank you, by the way, 287 for the $10. Pizza is good. I do appreciate the $10 for pizza. I want to go buy a pizza now. So when it comes to the undocumented immigration, some of it has to be accepted in because we're talking about asylum cases. We're talking about people who are making a humanitarian plea for assistance, and by international law, we have to let them in. For others, it has to do with the conditions of South American states. And so there's a question of how can Biden help make those countries more stable to disincentivize mass migration from those countries, from people who are in desperate situations. There's like a bunch of different things you can do to try to approach this question. But let's keep in mind that when it came to addressing this issue, and after Democrats and Republicans, Chris Murphy, James Lankford, and the rest of these guys sat down to try to make some bipartisan compromise, Donald Trump shot it down because he knew that that bipartisan compromise could be a political victory for Democrats. He didn't want to give them a political victory during an election year, and so he decided to shoot the deal dead. And we haven't had any attempt at immigration reform since. And now, in my mind, I think that we didn't get enough out of the deal. We didn't get a deal for the dreamers who deserve a deal, who deserve to be included in the American story. There's other stuff that I think was too draconian, or there wasn't enough victories for progressives to make me super satisfied with the deal. But there was a lot of stuff in there that was almost like a gift to Republicans, stuff that Republicans have been asking for a while, and they hadn't been awarded, and stuff that they might not get again in the future. And they just let it go for electoral short-term gain. It's the type of stuff that they're going to be kicking themselves in the ass for 2 years down the line. Some Republicans are already kicking themselves in the ass for it.
Of Americans agree that this shouldn't be happening.
I think that there's, when it comes to border stuff or immigration stuff, I think that most of the disagreement, I think for America, I think we generally agree on most things for what the immigration policy should look like. The problem is we have a very unique problem right now at the border relating to asylum seeking, and the federal government's hands are tied in terms of how you can deal with those people. So with the way that the law works right now, if you're an illegal immigrant and you come up to the border, you see that like the encounters have gone up dramatically. Well, so is the actual catch rate of people coming in. Like, not that many people are sneaking past the border guards. The reason why is because you don't have to actually sneak into the country anymore. You just have to show up between a port of entry, or maybe even at a port of entry now, and go, hey, I'm here to seek asylum. And once you've done that, it's like a get out of jail free card, and you're basically, they have to take you in, they have to process you because of how the federal laws on the books are right now, and then because we don't have enough judges to actually,
and because of international law, it isn't just federal law,
go through all the cases, you're given basically a slip. You're saying, hey, please show up for your trial, and then you basically release them into the country. Some people will try to say that like Biden does catch and release, or we have like a catch and release law. But we don't really. It's like a combination of pretty complicated things on the books for how we deal with asylum seekers. Now, Biden and the Democrats in Congress wanted to deal with this, but Trump was literally telling Republicans in Congress, do not touch the border issue. That's why the bipartisan bill that Republicans had largely approved of a few years earlier got completely shut down, because Republicans don't want to close this issue. Again, in classic Trump fashion, which is putting Trump ahead of the country, we didn't do anything about the border because Trump was telling Republicans not to fix a particular issue because he wants to win re-election. That's an issue that Biden and the Democrats tried to solve, but we couldn't do it.
Look, I want to hear Seb's answer to that and other things you're about to say, but just, I can tell you someone, look, I was born in the former Soviet Union. I don't live in America. I can promise you this unique set of circumstances that you're talking about, like every other country in the world, pretty much except Western Europe, is able to have a border. right? You can't just turn up to the border of Russia or China and like walk in and then be like, oh, can I please? That's not how it works. It's not. Look, the idea that
the asylum claiming, that is how it's supposed to work. Now, that doesn't mean that's how every country works, but that is how it's supposed to work.
Country has a border has not been controversial for very long. This is a very new.
But by the way, again, there's not a debate about whether America should have a border. There's a question that we have we have a very large border with Mexico. That's not, I mean, if you want, I guess we could just put like military patrols across the whole length, but even that wouldn't solve the issue, since so many people come from, like, who are in the United States illegally or here from work visas overlapping and being here because they've overstayed, or they'll just climb over the wall. But like the process also would stay the same because the laws would stay the same. And so again, they would just claim asylum. We have a border. We still have a border. Stop saying that this is about whether or not we have a border or not. We have a border. It's a question of enforcement of said border and how to properly enforce it while also being in bounds of international law.
And the fact that the number of people has skyrocketed since President Biden was elected, you can't put that on the Republicans.
Well, I'm not putting anything on the Republicans. What I'm saying is what I'm putting on them is the refusal to fix the actual issue, which is passing legislation to do it. And the last huge bipartisan bill that died in the House was supposed to increase the amount of judges we have to work through asylum seekers. It was supposed to change the standards that we would use to evaluate people claiming asylum. And it would have increased funding basically for every part of the
Wouldn't it be
security.
easy to just erect a physical barrier that prevents people from going into this country except at a port of entry?
No, it would not. I mean, there wouldn't have to there would be problems with visa overstays, which is a major way how undocumented immigrants stay in the United States. People would just try to avoid the physical barrier, and there's a good chance they could have success in avoiding the physical barrier. And again, the problem with process, if you claim asylum, you have to be given asylum. That's how refugees work.
Wouldn't do anything. This is the frustrating thing, because the issue is what I said. The issue, if you look at the vast
at least temporary confinement until your asylum case can be processed.
People that are coming in, and you talk about things like catch and release, it's asylum seekers. These are laws on the books that have to change. You can go to a border right now as an illegal immigrant and just like, hey, I'm like claiming asylum. Can I come in?
It's nothing to do with laws.
And then that's the issue that you have when you're trying to deal with our current immigration issue, is the asylum seeking process.
How did Sebastian Gorka just say immigration law has nothing to do with laws?
And you say that, like, well, other countries have borders and they don't have to deal with this. When the Syrian refugee crisis happened, I'm sure you remember, because I think it was probably a big motivating factor for Brexit, even if it was in the background. There were tons of refugees that were streaming into Europe, and there was a huge crisis. You saw a lot of right-wing parties gain popularity because of how unhappy people were. In Sweden, you've still got residual issues relating to those immigrants. You had the AfD rising in popularity in Germany. You had Marine Le Pen becoming popular again in France.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
But the problem is that all of those decisions about letting those people in, they were political decisions. And that's why people are frustrated, because the decision to allow 1 million refugees into Germany was a political decision, after which Angela Merkel admitted that multiculturalism doesn't work. It's not like the countries failed to have a border. It's that politicians choose to create a situation where millions of people flood into the United States.
I agree, but that's the choice that Trump and the Republicans have made right now, when we've said, hey,
when they say politicians choose to create a situation that'll lead to, I mean, they chose the civil war. Who chose the civil war in Syria? Like, if there was a civil war in Mexico tomorrow between the different cartels, like, we could choose how we could react to the ensuing mass displacement wave of people. But in some situations, we can't even control whether or not it happens in the first place. Or we could try to do our best to be, tamper it down. But again, if it happens, it happens. And so sometimes you can only deal with the results and deal with how you respond to it. Again, I keep making this Mark Twain comparison to leadership. Being the leader of a country isn't necessarily you just taking out a list of things you want to do, putting it on the ground, saying this is what we're doing. It's like going down the river on a raft, and you see different rocks and logs blocking your path. You've got to guide the raft around it to try to get to, well, wherever you're trying to get to. But the point is, you have to deal with the problems as they come.
we can change this with bipartisan infrastructure or with bipartisan immigration legislation. It was on the books. It wasn't on the books. It was a bill. It was ready to be passed. It would have addressed all of these issues. But Trump told Republicans, do not pass this bill. I need this as an election issue. And he didn't, even though this bill had, I wish I could remember the name of the Republican that had co-authored this, but this is like basically
James Lankford is the name he's looking for.
Republican authored bill that would have fixed all of these problems.
I want to give you more time on the other points. But
I will say one also, just one quick thing.
We're truly honored to be partnered with Monk Debates.
Monk Debates, cool for them. Continuing.
monkdebates.com. And now, on with the show.
Conservatives love to bring up the lowest unemployment for minorities under Trump and blah, blah, blah. We have the lowest unemployment for minorities right now under Biden. The idea that you would look at unemployment and use that as like a win for Trump when unemployment under Biden has been the lowest that it has been in all of U.S. history. And it's after rebuilding an economy, not like soaring ahead of like historically low interest rates year after year after year, which kind of led into a lot of the issues that we experienced with inflation and having to tighten up interest rates and everything. The economy under Biden has done exceedingly well. It would be nice if we had a Democrat come into office that wasn't trying to clean up the mess of the last conservative. We had Obama come in after the end of Bush's presidency, which was the 2007 housing crisis, which was like an international financial issue. And then we had Biden come in after Trump's horrible mishandling of COVID. It would be nice if we could actually get a Democrat to come in and run a clean 4 years instead of cleaning up the mess of the last conservative and then still trying to compete on things.
Seb, obviously you heard my interjections about immigration, and I think they're fair, certainly from my perspective. But the one thing I have also heard, including from many Republicans who might be mutual friends of ours or people who are high up in the Republican Party, is that Donald Trump is playing politics with these issues right now in order that he has a better chance of winning. Do you
Absolutely. Of course he is. Come on.
accept that?
No, I don't. Let's talk about this.
No, because he loves America. And unlike Biden, who hates America, Trump loves America and would never do that.
That the left wants to fix this, and they had legislation that a rhino, fake conservatives.
Wait, no, the left didn't want to fix this. There was a compromise deal where Democratic priorities, Republican priorities were going to be brought together to deal with what is now considered by quite a large portion of the American public to be an issue that needs to be resolved. And so they would get some of their priorities resolved. Republicans would get a lot of their priorities resolved, and they'd have some compromise that was acceptable to the majority of Republicans until it was sunk by Donald Trump. It was not going to fix everything. It was going to be the first step in trying to deal with this issue, one that was very difficult for both parties to take due to the ginormous divide in how they think they should deal with the issue. For example, the hiring of new election judges, big Democratic priority. The 5,000 cap, while then it was later lambasted by the right, was something that the right wanted. They wanted a cap of some sort.
In the Senate, the legislation stated that if you sign this into law, you will allow at least...
This is bullshit. You will not allow at least 5,000 people into the country every day. This is some nonsense that was spread around. What the law says is that if it hit 5,000, then they're going to shut everything down, meaning they accept no asylum claims, meaning if somebody comes across the border and they're literally like assassination target number one and they're claiming legitimate political asylum, I mean, that sucks for them. We've hit the 5,000 number. It doesn't mean at least. It means that's the limit. And if you hit it, then you stop all accepting or even legitimate asylum claims, which, by the way, I even had a problem with that. I on principle, the idea of turning away asylum claims when they could be legitimate is scary to me.
At least 5,000 illegals into America every 24 hours.
Again, just complete nonsense. Just something that was cooked up by some crackpot, then got repeated by a bunch of suits like Sebastian.
Of course, we're going to say that's garbage, that's insanity. The idea that they, in good faith, want to fix this. Let's just look. In preparation for today, I called up the former Commissioner of Customs and Border Protection, and I asked him, what is the situation like? Let's just talk about one statistic, because, 8 million illegals, it's hard to even fathom. In the last 3.5 years, they have intercepted 47,000 felons at the border. These are criminals coming into America. That is a 99% increase over our 4 years in government. Let's just say 100% increase. Besides that, they've found 160,000 felons, convicted felons, in America including 4,700 murderers and 8,000 gang members, one of whom murdered a beautiful 22-year-old nursing student called Laken Riley in Georgia. A man who murdered her after he was asyleed into America by Joe Biden's system, was then arrested for endangerment of a minor in New York, and Alvin Bragg, the Democrat DA of New York, led him onto the streets so he could murder this 22-year-old. Let's be clear. They created this. You're right. It's policy decisions. My parents were real refugees, real asylum seekers, because if my dad had gone back to the land of his birth as an escaped prisoner from a communist prison, he would have been shot on sight. You can't say 8 million political prisoners are coming across the border into America.
Okay, but to be clear, if you are somebody who cares about the political asylum process, if you set any limit as a hard cutoff limit, and you're not even happy with 5,000, so I assume you want the number to be 0, so we accept no asylum claims. If you don't what's your solution then? Do you accept no asylum claims and just tell the people who are fleeing legitimate political persecution to go die in a pit? Or do you accept some under the idea that, well, somebody might abuse this system, which is possible with all of it? Like, you're talking about 8 million people, and we're down to 8,000 gang members. 8,000 is a scary number. 8,000 and 8 million is statistically very small. And so in that 8 million number, there's probably a lot more legitimate cases than gang members who want to come here and do gang activities. I mean, the majority of undocumented immigrants commit less violent crime on average than native-born citizens. It's like the data just does not pan out. That is a bunch of gang members. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't gang members who have also come over. But again, if this is something that he wants to prioritize, he wants to still save this asylum system, then if 5,000 is not his number, what's his number? Should there be a number? Should there be a cap?
America. And let's just use the stats of the left. The United Nations, hardly a hard MAGA entity.
The United Nations is the left now? Okay.
Human Rights Watch, not exactly America First. What have these organizations stated about the deluge, the invasion of illegals across our border under Biden? Between 50 and 60% of the girls and the women are being raped or sexually assaulted by the coyotes, by the human traffickers. It is absolutely empirically a statement of fact that Joe Biden has become the largest human trafficker in human history.
I'm just like, dog. Really? Come on. You're under this logic, then you're going to say that anybody who illegally enters your country, then whoever is in charge is the trafficker. Then Donald Trump was a trafficker too. Then every president was a human trafficker because anybody crosses into your country illegally. I mean, under this logic, then, like, would it technically be me participating in breaking and entering if somebody breaks into my home without my knowledge? Or if a crime is committed within my country without my knowledge? Why does he have to be so performative? It cannot just be, oh, wow, that's very terrible. And that statistic was true under Trump. That was true under Obama. That was true under, like, this is a very sad statistic, the amount of sexual abuse that is done to girls. And instead of it being treated with respect, it's turned into a cudgel to beat Biden over the head to say he's a human trafficker, unlike Trump, because there were no rapes by coyotes under Trump. But there were all the rapes under coyotes under Biden. Because once Biden was elected, all the rapists said, oh, we can start raping again.
The party of...
Come on, sir.
No.
Come on. He's not...
Numerically.
Come on.
Numerically.
No, that's not what I'm disputing. I'm disputing the idea that he's a human trafficker.
Totally. His policies.
It's happening under his watch.
His decision. Let's talk about what he said.
No, hold on. No. But he's not a human trafficker.
He is.
That's ridiculous.
His policies have made his government empirically... You can't argue with 12,000 illegals a day. 12,000?
To call someone a human trafficker implies that...
As Trump shoots down a bill to bring that number down, and you said, oh, 5,000. 5,000 is not smaller than 12,000, and that bill was shot down.
Doing it on purpose.
They are doing it on purpose. I'll tell you why. Because they are so bigoted and so racist. Remember, this is the Democrat Party.
That is true. He got me there. I didn't know what his new plan of attack was going to be, to how Biden was a trafficker. But I didn't realize he was just going to say we're racist. I didn't think about that. That's a good point.
Party, the party of the KKK, the party of the Jim Crow laws. This is the party that, you know, whose activist murdered the first Republican president, Lincoln, the great emancipator. This is the DNA of the Democrats. The Democrats are so fundamentally bigoted. They believe if we let in millions of illegals.
Every single ounce of this is so performative. How do you listen to this guy? Who listens to this man in his free time?
Because they're brown.
Like, for what? Like, does this man have an independent thought in his body?
Because they're black-skinned, when we amnesty them and give them naturalization and citizenship, they will vote for us because of their skin color. This is CRT at its core, critical race theory, and that's why they're doing it. This isn't an accident. You don't open the borders an accident. You know that. And this isn't because of humanitarian.
What do you mean you don't open the border on if somebody claims asylum, you give them asylum. That's the way it's supposed to work. Now, while you review the asylum case, what you do from there, it's a little bit more complicated. There's more discretion, but that's how the asylum case works. And as for you know better than anyone that you can't stop illegal immigration. America's not the only country that deals with illegal immigration. I'm sick of treating it like we're the only country that deals with illegal immigration. We deal with it on a scale that most countries cannot fathom or think of, but other countries deal with illegal immigration all the time. People cross illegally the border of Ukraine to go into Moldova or Romania. People illegally cross the border or attempt to illegally cross the border into all types of countries. We're not the only country that has undocumented crossings.
Stuff. Let's talk about why it's happening technically and why he is the largest human
Finish the point,
trafficker.
and I want to say something.
How do these people come into America? Do you know what CBP-1 is, Stephen? CBP-1 is the app that illegals download on their way to America. It's funded by you and me, American taxpayers. They're sitting in Mexico. They're sitting in the Dominican Republic. They're sitting in Afghanistan. And they download an app where they pre-clear themselves. You tick a box. I am Mickey Mouse and I'm an asylum seeker. When you cross the border, you say, hey, I'm registered, and you're let into America. That's deliberate, Konstantin. That's not accidental, that's deliberate. And these people aren't political refugees.
Okay. Why didn't you build a wall when you had the chance?
We tried to, and we were stymied consistent. You know what President Trump had to do? This is the insanity. The protest.
I think they didn't build a wall because they hate America and they want to be able to complain about undocumented immigration because they hate America. I gotta say, that does make the political commentary much simpler.
Stations from the establishment were hysterical. We had to repurpose DOD funds and say the border is actually a national security issue if you've got terrorists coming across the border. We had to repurpose national security.
Also, America is not the only country where you can apply for asylum online. I just want to throw that out there. I thought that was kind of self-evident, but then I realized that maybe not everybody in this channel is familiar with refugee laws. So just saying.
Funds to build the border and buy the steel to build the wall. That took us over a year. What does Joe Biden do? He comes into the administration, and the steel members that we had bought to secure the border, he sold them for scrap iron. That's why it's deliberate, and that's why he's a human trafficker.
The talking points are funny. I think it's really funny. I think if you're listening to this in video form, I think you should rewind because I think Seb accidentally gave away part of the plot. It's funny because you described that border bill and you said that it allows 5,000 illegal immigrants to come in a day. Minimum? Wrong. That was the maximum cap.
No.
One of the issues that we face.
It literally is. He doesn't understand his own talking points, or he's had this repackaged and delivered to him from someone else. It is not minimum. It is the maximum. You hit 5,000 and then you stop. that's how it was supposed to work. What would 5,000 a day minimum even mean? Does that mean that Biden would be going up to the border saying, okay, Border Patrol, go across the border, get me some Mexicans, make sure they cross. We only have 3,000 crossings today. Oh God, please quickly and make citizenship extra cheap today. Like what? How would that even work if it was minimum? How do you have a minimum standard for a crime?
I did, sir. I did read it. Let me finish. I did read it. You should read it as well. No, I did read it. And it's funny because what you'd said later on was that we were seeing numbers sometimes in excess of 12,000 per day. The reason why that bill was so important, one of the things that would have been nice is it would have actually placed a cap on the amount of people that were coming in and claiming asylum. That 5,000 per day would have said that once we hit this cap, we are not processing anybody else. You could have the most legitimate asylum claim in the world, and we would not.
It is 100% true. I don't know why Gorka's lying about this. This is something you just Google. You just Google this.
You into this country, which was already about to be challenged by a ton of legal people around the United States. And I think the international...
yeah, there was a question about whether it's even legal that we can place a cap on it in the first place. And yet, still, that's not good enough. That's not draconian enough. It has to be, you don't accept any asylum seekers. It has to be, nobody gets allowed into the United States.
Or international bodies as well, because whether or not you can cap asylum seekers is still an internationally debated topic, but that is what that legislation seeks to do. If you feel, again, so passionately about the border, why didn't we pass any bipartisan infrastructure or bipartisan immigration legislation? Why did Trump shut it down?
Because you have to have the other side acting in good faith.
You can say that, but you did. If you really truly believe that the other side is at fault, then it seems like you need a candidate besides Trump, because Trump wasn't able to get anything done when he was president. You just said it yourself that Trump had to repurpose DOD funds to do it. Trump had a larger margin in Congress. Trump had all three branches of government and accomplished less than Biden did when it came to legislation, when it came to the border, when it came to infrastructure, when it came to foreign policy, when it came to almost every single aspect of running this country. And Trump was the one that came in saying, I'm the business guy. I can bring people together. I can get these things done because I know how to get people to work together. And all I hear from people once Trump left office was, well, the deep state got me, and it was the other guys, and I couldn't do anything, and I had to take money from the DOD to do it. I couldn't figure anything out, and blah, blah, blah. And now that he's out of office, supposedly running for America, despite the fact that what he's really running for is so that he can pardon himself from his crimes and be immune from, hopefully, state charges, what he's really running for, is to save himself. And that's why he didn't care about the border. That's why he tries to continue the border problems. He wasn't able to fix it when he was in office because he's more concerned with his reputation than actually bringing people together to get anything done. I don't understand how, even if you believe everything that you've said, that asylum seeking is an issue, that illegal immigration is an issue, even if you believe that these are issues that are brought by Democrats intentionally and they're destroying the country, which are all ridiculous claims, Donald Trump is not the guy to fix them because he already proved that he couldn't do it once.
All right, so we can go back and forth saying, I read this, I read that. Look it up for yourselves. Everybody can do that, okay?
It's always beautiful when you get cornered to a point where you're just like, okay, people can figure it out for themselves. It's a 5,000 cap. What would a 5,000 minimum illegal crossings a day even mean? So you're forcing undocumented people across the border to come to America? How would that even work? It doesn't make sense.
I just want it to be common sense. Does anybody with a straight face have the capacity to say, yeah, the Democrats are strong on the border and immigration and Trump isn't? I mean, it beggars belief. It's risible.
That's one of the weaker points Stephen made, but I think a very strong point that he made right at the end.
Well, I mean, if the question is like, who's willing to negotiate a deal at this point? Democrats were, Trump wasn't. And so Trump is willing to try to shove through his maximalist agenda. But would he be willing to negotiate a compromise with Democrats that would be able to pass a Senate filibuster? I don't think so.
I'd like to hear your answer is, Donald Trump, you say, didn't build the wall because there was a lack of support from the other side. They were not acting in good faith. Okay. Well, you think there's going to be more good faith after he gets elected, let's say, in 2024?
Right. I'm not sure it's the good faith that's the problem. He seems to paint President Trump.
No, you said this earlier.
No, but let me just unpack it in terms of what's possible and what isn't. I said this when I was in the White House. I said it after I left the White House. Donald Trump won the election despite the GOP, not thanks to the GOP. I mean, this is the oddity. I mean, this is what Americans forget, and I find it funny that I have to, remind Americans who were born here, unlike me, a legal immigrant, that Donald Trump, the American people did something utterly historic in 2016. Because prior to that, every chief executive, from George Washington to Obama, was from the same class. They were either senators, congressmen, governors, or retired four-star generals. Every single one, from George Washington to Obama. Then what did the American people do in 2016? They say, we've had it with the swamp, the establishment.
People talk about the American people decided this, the American people decided that. A majority of the American people voted against Donald Trump being president. The American people did not decide necessarily that Donald Trump should be president. It was calculated for region, adjusted for region majority of electoral votes went for Donald Trump and decided he should be president. The majority of people voted against Donald Trump twice. Just throwing that out there. Right. And by the way, can we stop pretending like the businessmen aren't part of the elite? Just because they're not a general, they're not a politician. Businessmen are also part of the elite. Oligarchs dominate countries very often and capture political control, and it's not a fun time.
I know the Democrats, they elect a man who's never run for any office, not county dog catcher, a guy who has no political background, and they say, F you to the establishment, we want him. That's actually historic. Now, that's what the president had to compete with. When we walked into the White House on January 21st, I said this publicly back then, there were less than 20 of us in senior positions like myself who were actually America First and MAGA, right? Because it was an insurgency, it was a political insurgency. The establishment hated President Trump. We had people inside the building who were actively subverting him, even his former chief of staff. That will not happen in a second Trump administration because the president understands what Reagan taught us. Personnel is policy. We can't have, people betraying the will of the American voter.
So Donald Trump chose the wrong staff last time, but that bad judgment will not affect him a second time, is the statement then. Okay.
Inside the wire, inside the building. It's more than just, he didn't pass legislation. He actively had people who believe in the footsie under the table with the other side. I'll get my cushy, lobbyist job after I leave Congress. That's changed in the last 8 years. The Republican Party now is MAGA, is America First. There's a few holdouts and rhinos who are leaving like Mitt Romney, but the situation for getting even more stuff fixed is much brighter than it was when we walked in 2016.
Stephen, anything you want to say?
Populism usually takes a pretty predictable route where people are frustrated with a set of circumstances, which, to be fair, there's a lot of things to be frustrated about. And what you do is you turn to a strong man who promises to deliver you from all of your evils, to deliver you from the pain and the suffering of whatever around you, because he's the one source of truth, the one source of goodness, the one guy that can get the job done. That's what Donald Trump sold himself as when he came into office. And like every populist, he came in, he overpromised, and he underdelivered. Trump failed on every single conceivable metric when it came to being a president, besides, and I will admit, he is very funny. He's very funny, he's got good stage presence, and he can work a crowd. That's why the nicest thing...
The economy was pretty good during his period until COVID hit.
The economy was good, but I mean, you can Google markets, you can look at indicators, everything had been hitting all-time highs since 2013 under Obama, right? Ever since the economy crashed after 2007 and started to recover, that same recovery happened under Trump. And it was happening with pretty low interest rates, and it was just a carry on.
See, this is the thing. If I was a Trump supporter, what I would say about the Biden statistics that Destiny laid out earlier about how the Biden unemployment numbers even better would be Biden picked up the Trump economy and ran with it. But if you accept that logic, and this would be the problem that Sebastian Gorka would run into, is that you would also have to run into the logic that Donald Trump picked up the Obama economy and ran with it.
From Obama's administration. People will say, well, the economy was really good under Trump. What did Trump even do? He did a bunch of tax cuts and that's it. He didn't really do much else.
Hold on.
And then as a quick thing again, I'm sorry, but my managerial experience in the ordinary world, outside of the, I guess, the YouTube world I live in now, is limited. But I was a supervisor in a restaurant. If I was given a shift and all my tables were dirty, and my manager comes in and she sees my restaurant, it's my ass. I'm in trouble. I can't say, like, well, these employees were working against me and these guys didn't show up and these guys didn't call in. She said, okay, well, you're getting paid the big bucks. It's your responsibility. You're the leader there, right? When Trump was coming into office, because I am an ardent capitalist, the only redeeming quality I saw was, well, okay, he is a business guy. So at the very least, maybe he's got some comprehension in terms of how to get people with different opinions to actually work together. And he is the most divisive leader in like all of U.S. history, or at least recent U.S. history. The idea that, you know, even his former chief of staff was against him, like that's a point in favor of Trump. These are your people. You're nominated. How is it that every person that's worked with him, how is it that his former attorney generals, his chiefs of staff, his personal friends, his personal lawyers, when you have this many people around you that are saying to the rest of the world, don't trust this guy. This guy is no good. I don't work with him anymore. I don't trust this guy anymore. Like, at what point do you look at him and you're like, okay, well, maybe it's not actually the deep state, every single institution, all of the media, all of the world, all of academia, and all of the politicians against him. Maybe it's just kind of like a bad person who's not very good at getting his job done.
This is, it's like you live in an alternate universe. I know you're on YouTube and that those are your qualifications. But
we're all on YouTube, Seb.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. I've been banned. I've been banned on YouTube.
Oh, so Destiny has more qualifications than Sebastian Gorka. Good to know.
Right? So, you know, I take that as a mark of honor. I'm on Rumble. So let's be, this idea that...
That's his qualification, is Rumble?
He failed at everything. Yeah, that's a great description of Joe Biden, from mortgage rates...
Wow. Burned. No, you, Destiny. No, you.
To inflation, to the price of energy, to surrendering in Kabul, to the invasion of Ukraine, to...
What do you mean the invasion of Ukraine? Biden invaded Ukraine? Oh my goodness, I didn't know he was commanding the landing in Hostomel Airport. And didn't Trump negotiate the withdrawal from Afghanistan?
No has donated $12.
Hey.
This debate makes me want to tear my hair out.
It is frustrating.
Sebastian Gorka is not charismatic at all and speaks
Nope.
like a Newsmax anchor. And the
Worse.
moderator is the definition of an enlightened
centrist. He is true. He wants to make sure everybody's happy so everybody will come back so they can make more content. I sympathize.
October the 7th, yeah, massive...
October the 7th? We're blaming Biden for October the 7th? How are we going to blame Biden for Israel's security failures?
Successes in the last 3.5 years. Let's talk about my bailiwick. Let's talk about national security. We had been told by our predecessor, Obama, that ISIS, quote, is a threat we just have to get to learn to live with. Can't be solved, just going to live with it. When we came into the White House...
Did he say that about ISIS or terrorism, generally?
President Trump got the lawyers out of the way and unleashed JSOC and Delta Force. Within 5 months, the caliphate of ISIS was gone, kaput. China, we initiate...
Wait, is that really his retelling of the events? Okay, so first thing, ISIS is still around. There was just a big Moscow attack. There was also an attack at Iran. ISIS also bombed and killed our troops in Afghanistan. You cannot say that ISIS was completely annihilated, then leave office, and then have your next president deal with ISIS terror attacks in Afghanistan, and then say, like, you succeeded if you then pass over a withdrawal with your troops getting killed by the terror organization you just claimed was destroyed. That's the first thing. Second thing, Donald Trump inherited Operation Inherent Resolve. And we talked about this briefly earlier, but Operation Inherent Resolve was an operation against ISIS, crafted so that we would work with the local SDF, that's the Syrian Democratic Forces, which was made of the Kurdish YPG and YPJ, which is the female units, as well as some allied Arab militias that were fighting against ISIS. And we would assist them with air power, special forces, training, weapon shipments, etc. This was an operation started under the Obama administration, which was then carried to completion under the first year of the Trump administration. You cannot say Obama was this fumbling buffoon on ISIS who couldn't even conceive of a world without ISIS, and then give Trump credit for completing the last phase of Obama's plan that he made with people like Brett McGurk and other Middle East advisors. It's just not fair. It's just not fair to the history.
A trade war with China. We facilitated the rise of NATO to such an extent that under President Trump's presidency, defense spending shot up by $400 billion inside NATO. The guy who was going to destroy it actually saved it. Then we look at,
unity in NATO was also unprecedentedly, was not completely unprecedented for the entirety of its time. But the unity within NATO was reduced, and people can talk about like Trump inspiring increases in NATO defense budgets. I don't know how much he actually inspired increases in NATO defense budgets versus the invasion of Ukraine inspiring much more and much larger increases in NATO defense budgets. Not to mention, like, you can yell at people to just spend more money, but in a crisis, you also have to lead. You also have to lead to different countries, lead to different coalitions, lead to different militaries. And I do not think Donald Trump, come the invasion of Ukraine, would have been able to make the Ukraine contact group in order to coordinate aid and different packages to Ukraine in time. I don't. I generally don't. I also don't know if he would feel particularly motivated to, considering he was willing to leverage aid during his time in power in order to get political favors from Zelensky.
The Middle East. 5 peace accords in less than 4 years.
Normalization accords, but whatever. That's good too. It's just, I don't like calling it like a peace accord if all that's happening is country A and country B is agreeing to open up ties. Also, I believe some of that was already reversed. I believe Kuwait has already reversed that after the recent wave of violence between Israel and Hamas. But a peace accord implies that he ended a war, which he didn't. He normalized relations between two states, sometimes sacrificing the rights of other people to do it, like the people of Western Sahara, which he sacrificed their sovereignty, or at least UN recognized sovereignty, as in the fact that they deserve to have a vote for the possible future state that they could have formed out of Morocco, which we agreed with in the 90s. He gave that up in order to get Morocco's support for Israel to normalize ties.
These are meant to be failures for us. Let's look at the international environment. Under Obama, Ukraine, Crimea, taken. Under Biden, again, a second invasion. Hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians and Russians dead. The largest loss of Jewish life since the Holocaust.
Okay, the thing that gets me about the Russian invasion of Ukraine is that, or doing this comparison here, is Trump didn't do anything on the issue for 4 years, and then indicated that he didn't particularly care about it by not only was he completely basically uninvolved with the aid conversation to Ukraine, but then when aid was finally approved by Congress and Trump had no authority because it was a veto-proof majority to overrule it and hold that aid, he held it anyway, unconstitutionally, in order to get favors from Zelensky. What message does that send to Putin? Does that send the message of, wow, we care a whole lot about Ukraine? Or does it send the message of, Ukraine's nothing more than a political pawn, and we're willing to use it in order to fight each other's domestic political battles? I think it sends the second. I think it sends the latter message, which I think undercuts deterrence.
In Israel, and then the...
By the way, I also think Biden and Obama, well, at least early Biden, and even mid-Biden, and there's still some failings in the Biden administration policy towards Ukraine. I have many critiques of that as well, but the idea that Trump does not fall into many of the same traps that Obama fell into when it came to dealing with the Russians over Ukraine is not the case.
Absolute surrender and betrayal of the Afghan people in a withdrawal that made Saigon look like a small incident. These are supposed to be the successes. And as to this, oh, he's the most divisive. It's so peculiar, but I find it incapable, I find it impossible to remember my former boss, giving speeches in front of iconic locales such as Independence Hall in Philadelphia, bathed in red fascistic light, with Marines flanking him, labeling half of America extremists and fascists, and preaching to us about white supremacy in his State of the Union address.
So Biden's speech at State of the Union, the thing he's called half America racist and fascist, he said that the MAGA movement was like dangerous. So he's talking about maybe at most 20 to 25% of America, if you consider them all part of the movement and not people who were duped, that were conned into being part of the movement. But I think claiming half of America as the MAGA movement is just deluded.
That really brings us together. This is the man who told us, Biden said...
Also, who cares about the Marines and the red lighting? Like, this is getting caught up in aesthetic frills.
Inauguration, I'm going to bring you together by calling half the nation white supremacists, when the real racist problem in America are the Democrats on the campuses saying death to America from the river to the sea.
The lefts are the real racists.
Jewish. That's the left today. Radicals who hate America. I go back to my original point.
Back to hating America.
This strange idea of populism, using this label as a smear, some kind of pejorative. I don't know. I remember the good old days where if you had the popular support of the people, that was a good thing. I don't like the elites. They stink. They're corrupt. But a guy comes along who has popular support. No, the elites will decide. Just like Sam Harris destroyed himself on your podcast when he said, I don't care if Hunter Biden had dead children in his basement. The plot against Donald Trump and the election in 2020 was, quote, justified. That's the left. That's the other side. Those are the divisive people.
I want to talk about a couple of things you raised there, which is foreign policy, geopolitics, etc., and also what's happening on college campuses, Stephen, as well. I would like you, before I go back to Stephen, to address you the one point that he made, which I think is worth exploring, which is we say this guy knows how to get things done, and you say you had all these people in the White House and elsewhere who were working against him. What about what Stephen said, which is he just seems like an asshole that annoys everyone and people can't work with him?
Well, look, I've said it many times before. It is absolutely remarkable what he achieved in really not 4 years, 2 years, despite the people who are subverting him because they represent the elite class.
What were those achievements again?
I like that we're constraining Trump to 2 years. He only had 2 years in power, not 4 years. Biden's 3.5 years. He lost the Congress a year and a half ago. Now he gets the full term. Why are we judging Trump by a half term now? Why are we giving Trump training wheels when it comes to how we judge him as a president?
The strongest economy we've ever had, lowest unemployment.
No, like things he's done, not things that happened.
What do you mean? What's the difference?
So, like, if I stand outside and a tree grows, I wouldn't say that I grew the tree.
Oh, yeah, you said he did nothing in regards to the economy.
Like, what
I'll give you the example. You said he did nothing with not his responsibility. When we came into the White House, the president had a modest goal. He said, I've had it with the growth of the state. You know, the burden on the average American. 60% of businesses are small businesses in America. I want to get the monkey off the back of the guy who has the family company. So what did he do? He said, I'm not going to sign any executive orders as president unless for every one I sign, 2 are rescinded. I want to have a redress of the balance.
What an arbitrary standard.
The abuse of executive power. We said, okay, sir, by not the end of the first year, by the 10th month of the first year, that figure wasn't 2-to-1. The figure was 22-to-1. We had rescinded 22 executive orders for every new one the president signed. That's how you unleash the economy. And that's exactly what happened. When you allow federal government lands to be used for energy exploration, when you say, yes, XL Keystone Pipeline, when you block Russia's Nord Stream, that's when you unleash the American people. And that's on President Trump.
Let's just finish this point, Seb, which is about the fact that Donald Trump is...
He didn't stop Nord Stream, by the way. He didn't. He failed to stop it. It was the war that ended up really stopping it.
Is not able to lead the country well because he's not able to bring enough people with him to buy into his vision, and instead you had constant turmoil internally. And it's not just rhinos who were leaving; it was people like Steve Bannon.
No, he didn't. He didn't leave. He was fired by the chief of staff, who was an actual seditionist. Right? John Kelly fired him. Steve didn't want to go.
So why didn't Donald Trump overrule him and say, this is my guy?
Because he trusted Kelly. This is a 4-star general, right? This is a guy who was in the Marine Corps. Sadly, he didn't know. He didn't have buddies in the swamp. But now, after the last 7 years, let me assure you, because this is my number one concern, and I've discussed it with the president, he knows who to trust.
Now he's got it on. But see, when he was running for president of the United States, he didn't know what he was doing. But now that he's running for president of the United States again, now he has a better idea of who to hire.
And he knows who not to trust. Therefore, he will achieve even more, God willing, if we re-elect him in November.
All right, Stephen, go for it. We'll do a few minutes with you, and then I want to move on to geopolitics. What's happening?
I can incorporate that even.
Yeah.
The idea that Trump, a billionaire real estate developer from New York, didn't have friends in the swamp, which is very funny to me.
In the political
wasn't
swamp.
This guy? Wasn't he literally in pictures at Hillary and Bill Clinton's wedding? I mean, like the idea that
you're living in
the
Manhattan.
idea that
That doesn't mean you're running a political campaign.
No, but you have the
He's a
connections.
realtor.
Yeah,
he's a
billionaire realtor
who has never run anything in government. How would you know who the good bureaucrat is and the crappy one like Fauci? How would you know that? You're building real estate.
Because real estate...
Do you know a lot? You're in media. Do you know how to create a cable TV show?
I know a decent amount.
Do you know a lot?
About,
no, do you know
I know a decent bit about real estate. And I know that real estate is one of the most tax-advantaged things. I know that real estate has some of the highest integrations with city council planners, with policies.
Who the Secretary of Defense should be? It's absurd.
If he doesn't have any of these ideas, then you're making a very strong argument for career politicians. This is why people that tend to do politics stay in politics, is because they're actually able to know these things. They understand these things. They have these relations.
We need more of them, Stephen.
Well, considering that Trump, again, failed in every conceivable metric, and you weren't able to give me like any strong things that he actually succeeded in.
Seb, hold on.
You said that he rescinded executive orders. Like, that is a measurable increase. Give me something like the CHIPS Act. Give me something like...
This is the thing about executive orders, too, is they're executive orders. The next administration can immediately undo all the work you did. If all you did in office was executive orders, what you're saying is, I couldn't get the legislator to do anything, so I just did everything I could within my power from the executive office, knowing that the next administration can immediately shoot it all in the leg immediately. Just take it all out back and treat it like Old Yeller.
It matters, though. I mean, for the people who want to reduce the size of government, that would be
it's a lip service thing. I would encourage everybody that hears. There's two lines that people. There's one really common line that politicians always say. It's politispeak, which is funny that Trump utilized it. But it's this: I'm going to go line by line through the budget. I'm going to go line by line, and I'm going to get rid of all wasteful spending. First of all, this is just fiscal stuff. Okay, this impacts your budget, which, by the way, Trump ran record deficits when he was in office. So budgetarily, he still failed. But this doesn't improve your economy or unleash your economy. It's not like we were rescinding significant executive orders that was destroying our ability to actually succeed. If anything, I would say the most successful businesses that we had growing in the United States were our tech companies that Republicans are constantly trying to undermine and destroy by getting rid of Section 230, which would make it so you could sue Twitter when somebody posts something on Twitter that I don't like. So no, the idea that that Trump was unleashing the economy by rescinding some irrelevant executive orders that had no impact on the economy anyway, and the fact that he was still running these record level deficits, even though the economy was exploding all 3 years, at least under his presidency, is ridiculous. Oh man.
That would be a great thing to ask Gorka about. What about the deficits?
If we want to go foreign policy, Jesus, almost every single decision that Trump made under foreign policy was either a form of kicking the can down the road, or it just did nothing. We talk about like the historic stuff that happened with the Abraham Accords. I'm sorry, but the Abraham Accords started because Netanyahu was on the verge of annexing the West Bank, and the Gulf states were like, this is probably not a good idea, and a lot of people are going to be mad. And then Kushner hopped in, and there were official conversations that were essentially facilitated. And then eventually you start getting these bilateral treaties that are signed between Israel and other countries. But these bilateral treaties did something very important that's happened with other treaties with Israel, and that is that they undermined the Palestinians. They didn't include them in any of the conversations. So But when you look at what happened on October 7th, and then you look at Biden, you go, man, this must be Biden's fault. It's like, okay, well, didn't we just have a historic round of talks with countries in the Middle East? How is it that the Palestinians were excluded yet again from these talks, And the idea that Trump was some strong partner in the Middle East when in 2019, Iran literally was shooting drones and missiles over into Saudi Arabian refineries, and the United States stood by and did nothing. Or the idea that we're going to stand here and we're going to say, oh my God, in Afghanistan, we pulled out and abandoned our people.
He's writing down.
That timetable was set by Donald Trump. He had a round of talks called the Doha talks that happened with the Taliban, and the Afghanistan government was completely excluded from those talks. When Biden came into office, we'd already been drawn down to historically low numbers in Afghanistan. We had almost no military presence left over there. When Biden came into office, basically the only thing left to do was to follow through on Trump's timetable, which was to pull us out of Afghanistan.
But hold on a second.
Yeah.
Just on that particular thing, didn't you just say that if you're managing a restaurant and your boss comes in and sees a messy table, that's on you? And yet in this situation, you're saying it's Donald Trump's fault, even though it's Joe Biden that did it.
Nice.
It's not nice, and I'll explain why. If you take over a new...
I'm just trying to be fair.
No, that's fine. It's a good question. It's a good question.
You.
If you take over a restaurant and you're the manager of a restaurant, you bought a business, and somebody comes in and they say, hey, I'm going to sit here with me and 20 friends, okay, because that's what we're going to do. And I go, well, no, that's bullshit. And they go, well, actually, you bought this restaurant and we signed a contract with your last boss that gave us the right to do this for a year. Well, if you buy a business, generally you also inherit, along with the assets and liabilities, prior agreements you've signed as well, or the previous owner did. With the Doha agreements, we were on a timetable to leave. Now, could Biden have increased the troop presence and fought against that withdrawal? He could have, but then at what cost? Remember, it only takes 1 or 2 attacks against U.S. soldiers by the Taliban to have the United States thinking like, well, shoot, do we need to stay there for another 10 or 20 years?
And then there's a question of deterrence, because like if America stays in and then we get like a bunch of troops killed by the Taliban, on one end of society is going to be asking for a withdrawal because we don't want any more troops to die in what most Americans saw as a losing effort. But on the other end, there's going to be there's going to be American political advisors who are going to be saying, hey, American troops just got killed. We have to strike back. If we don't strike back, then other terror groups are going to look at our leaving of Afghanistan as a booklet, something to follow. Like, oh, you just kill a few soldiers and they will cave to terrorists. Okay, let's do that. So to keep up deterrence, we have to strike back. And many of them wouldn't want to leave in the first place, which Biden wanted to do since like 2012, 2013, which he achieved. Despite everything, he did achieve that. It could set but my main point is, if we were to stay longer and try to stay in to get a better deal, it could have set off a chain of events that could eventually lead to Biden being in between a rock and a hard place, we either withdraw after a terror attack, meaning a possible degradation of our deterrence, as well as humiliation on a world stage, or staying in the country at immense cost to both lives and just, monetary, because it's going to be expensive to keep our troops there, staying in a generally unpopular war.
The pullout could have gone better. I think that there were people that should have had the opportunity to leave that country that worked with us, that should have come out, that didn't get that opportunity. But compare that to say, because remember, this is done under a Trump timetable. What is Trump's excuse for abandoning the Kurds that we fought alongside in Syria to a Turkish onslaught? There was no excuse for that. There was no reason for that. But he did that with, I don't even know, because he said, well, I don't want to be in the Middle East anymore.
No, he said because the Kurds weren't with us at Normandy. Since they weren't with us at D-Day, they weren't a real ally. That was his original, real justification that he gave.
And then he obscured all the information relating to Yemen drone strikes that we were helping Saudi Arabia with, as opposed to Biden, who said we're no longer going to participate in the Saudi-led coalition.
I'm telling you, Erdogan called him in the middle of the night. He did a little razzle-dazzle in front of him. He fell for it. They put out the announcement in the middle of the night, so I assume that's when the phone call happened. And then he had to justify the policy post facto. Be Easy Radio, thank you so much for the gifted tier 1 sub to ENNY43. I appreciate it.
Coalition in Yemen, which was, I think, an improvement. We axed the Iranian nuclear deal, and then we replaced it with nothing. I guess ostensibly that's supposed to keep Iran from pursuing nuclear weapons.
The idea was a policy of quote unquote maximum pressure. It didn't really achieve anything, but the defenders of the maximum pressure campaign would say, well, that's because it's going to take time to get the maximum pressure to actually have downstream effects and lessening the amount of income they can give to their militias in the region, while the other people would say, well, it's not having that much of an effect because we've tried maximum pressure on the Iranians before, didn't work, it's not working again. We have to negotiate with them on something. Plus, Americans are not excited for a long, drawn-out confrontation with the Iranians with possible troop deployments.
We had historic photographs taken with Kim and our leaders for nothing, I guess. I've heard Sebastian claim in the past that they stopped ballistic missile testing. That's not true. That you can literally go on the Wikipedia and read test after the dates. Pence and I believe Tillerson were both complaining about those talks because literally nothing got done in North Korea.
We did also stop military drills with South Korean troops over trying to normalize a relationship with North Korea and trying to get those talks through. So we also put our readiness operations on hold to have these conversations with the North.
Every part of Donald Trump's foreign policy, it was a disaster.
Well, let me give you a narrative that is popular with people who probably don't agree with you, which is that the main thing about Donald Trump is that people around the world, and I can tell you this is true, people around the world feared and respected him. They didn't like him necessarily, but they feared and respected him. And the fact that they
might have, I don't know, maybe they feared him in a kind of sporadic kind of way, but I don't know, respect him is shit. They laughed at him. They literally laughed at him at the United Nations. Can we... 1 second.
Today I stand before the United Nations General Assembly to share the extraordinary progress we've made. In less than 2 years, my administration has accomplished more than almost any administration in the history of our country. America's so true. Didn't expect that reaction, but that's okay.
You have Iran-backed people from Gaza committing October 7th, the fact that Putin felt able to invade Ukraine, the fact that China is getting more muscular on Taiwan. This is a sign of the perceived weakness of the United States under Joe Biden. And you can take that at whatever level you want, all the way through to sitting down across from Joe Biden and going, this guy can't finish a sentence.
If we want to say that the United States has a weak foreign disposition right now, I think I would probably agree with that.
Okay.
But I don't think it's because of Biden. I think it's because of how divided we are internally. And I think when you look at a country and you see that they're like fighting with themselves, like okay.
I mean, we delayed aid to Ukraine for 6 months for no good reason. There was no good reason. People could talk about like aid conversations or the nuance of funding. The bill we passed, when we eventually passed it, was in the real substance of the bill, no different than the legislation that was proposed 6 months ago. In substance, it was not different on any scale, justifying a delay for 6 months and the lives that were lost because of that delay. And that delay can only be explained by increased political divisiveness within the United States, leading that partisanship domestically spilling over into America's international position and delaying us in supporting our allies, which does not just send concern up the spine of Ukrainians, but up the spine of South Koreans, Taiwanese, and anybody who is relying on the United States for its national survival.
Okay, well, let's come over here.
I wrote a whole book about that, so I definitely agree with you.
Because like when I look at any of these particular issues, and it's easy to kind of like paint a story if you just like name some things and you don't really dig into them. Like
bankrupt man.
Hey, Nitsuder, thank you so much for the tier 1 sub. Made sub for 24 months on a 20-month streak right now. Damn, good streak. Love your reporting, my man. Thanks for doing what you do. Thank you, I appreciate that.
We talk about Iran, right? And we say, well, October 7th, Iran was bold enough to, do foreign proxy training for troops in Hamas. Okay, well, Iran physically, literally attacked Saudi Arabia under Donald Trump, and nothing happened. So why would we imagine that they wouldn't back Hamas as well? It's not like Trump destroyed.
It's not about imagination. It didn't happen when.
Well, no, it did. That
Donald
attack
Trump.
did happen. Iran attacked Saudi Arabia, and Trump didn't.
But October
which is
7th,
bolder than
October
October
7th didn't happen.
Sure, but from an Iranian perspective,
I hate this way of looking at the world. That we look at the word primarily based upon this happened under this American president, therefore it's their fault. This didn't happen during the American president, therefore they stopped it. Trump was president for 4 years, therefore there was not a war. There was not another invasion of Ukraine in those 4 years, therefore he stopped a war. War happens afterwards, therefore it's that president's fault while Trump prevented it. It's really dumb logic, because under that logic, then Herbert Hoover was able to prevent an invasion of Poland. Every other president that was alive when Poland wasn't invaded was able to prevent invasions of Poland. And then come 1939, FDR, worst president ever, causes invasion of Poland. Like, under this logic, everything's based on the American president. It's a very American-centric view of the world.
that attack was bolder than October 7th.
Pop and Wap, thank you so much for the gifted tier 1 sub. I appreciate it. It's not to say that they have no effect, and it's not like you can't acknowledge failures, but this is very simplistic. I really don't like this logic. I think it could have some really bad conclusions.
Burns is an immoral.
Pop and Wap, thank you so much for the gifted tier 1 to start trooping. I really appreciate that, buddy. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Gifted 35 total. Damn. Hey, we got a hype train. My goodness, first hype train in a while. Herbert Hoover is the real. I mean, he's the real G. He saved Poland, unlike that clown FDR,
etc.
Yeah, for Ukraine, Donald Trump didn't like. The Crimean Peninsula was inhabited by Russian troops the entire time. Donald Trump didn't do anything to stop that. Donald Trump didn't care about that. It's not like we pulled anything out of there.
Let me just do this bit.
Yeah.
That's a bit different though, Stephen, because in 2014, as Seb said correctly, under Obama, Russia took Ukraine and started a civil war in eastern Ukraine.
Yeah.
Don't call it a civil war. Please don't call it a civil war. Then you make it sound like it was as if it was like, oh, all these rebels rose up and, you know, the Russians gave them a little help and the Ukrainians fought them back and they pushed and pulled, when it was the Russian army intervening every time that ended up propping up the rebellion, quote unquote, every single time. It directly intervened. So it was a Russian invasion on behalf of a proxy within Ukraine that they propped up to act as their agent within the country. You can call it a civil war if you want, but then under that logic, the Russian invasion of Finland was also a civil war because they crafted a proxy before the invasion. They crafted a Finnish socialist republic that they were invading on behalf of to protect the socialists and, of course, protect their own border and, you know, get some land around St. Petersburg. But also they crafted this proxy. So if we're going to describe it as a civil war, we have to describe a lot of things as civil wars, but we don't really generally describe it as a civil war, the Russian invasion of Finland, because we understand the two players that were really at play here.
Steve wanted us to invade.
To recapture Crimea at that point would have meant literally World War III. So,
well, I mean, if we were to be the ones to force them with our armies, possibly. But the idea that there's no way to get the Russians out of there outside of World War III, I think gives some weird. I think it gives an overwhelming amount of power to the Russians, a lot more than we necessarily should.
Nobody could have retaken Ukraine. It's not like Joe Biden's position when he was elected was, we're going to help Ukraine retake Crimea.
Yeah.
So what I'm putting to you, and I think it's a fair question, isn't it the weakness of the withdrawal from Afghanistan? I think we'd both agree was calamitous. Whoever's fault it was, that's where the debate was. Signaled weakness to other people who wanted to capitalize on that. Yes, I agree with you, the internal divisions in America contribute to that, but ultimately isn't a large part of this the signaling of weakness that invites challenge?
No, because again, I would say, pointing to Ukraine, it's not like Russia stopped their military activity in Ukraine because of Trump being in office. That the invasion just hadn't escalated yet to where they were doing a full-on actual on-the-ground military invasion instead of the more subversive stuff.
Well, no, they were doing an on-the-ground military invasion back then too, just on a much smaller scale.
Yeah.
Under Trump, post the 2014 taking of Crimea, and once the Minsk Accords were in place, there was no hot war going on in Ukraine.
There was still the civil war in the south.
Well, it was sporadic. It was sporadic, but yeah, I mean, it wasn't like what we're seeing now, but it was sporadic on and off fighting.
East. That war has been raging for like 10 years. The conflict, you think there was a total... Didn't those Minsk agreements last for like months? Minsk 1 and 2?
No, look, I have a lot of family in Ukraine. It's a region I understand very well. Post the Minsk Accords, there was no hot war going on.
For how long?
Well, until the invasion, basically. Until the invasion. It was pretty stable. Now, I'm not saying there wasn't the occasional people, but it was broadly, there was a ceasefire in place. People were not killing each other en masse. I can tell you.
Yeah, I'd have to go and I would look that up.
He's out of his depth.
Out of my depth. Okay. I mean, we can focus on the Middle East more if you want. But yeah, no, I don't think that. I mean, Trump. We talk about NATO. I think that Trump was constantly like NATO skeptic on the international level. I think a lot of people expressed a lot of fear for that.
Well, he wanted other nations within NATO to contribute their fair share.
Yeah, their military percentage of GDP,
which they were not doing. And he was saying we can't continue with NATO if America is the only country that's actually paying its way.
Okay, well, let's talk about like signaling weakness on the world stage, though. There was at one point where he suggested, Donald Trump publicly, that if a country doesn't pay the 2%, then we should literally abandon their defense. We should quite literally abandon their defense because Europe doesn't do enough for NATO. Why should we go protect them? By the way, the only country that's actually triggered Article 5 is the United States after 9/11. And then all these countries sent troops to the Middle East, they're young, to die for us after 9/11. So I do say that is something that rubs these countries who just spent the last 20 years fighting the war on terror in large part due to our direction and are now getting thrown off as like, it's not a good way to increase relations is what I'm saying.
Sure, but the idea that the leader of NATO would be publicly undermining NATO and saying we might have to pull out or stop it.
But I mean, again, like the idea, I mean, Trump even went as far to say that he would encourage the Russians to invade if they didn't pay their fair share. What does that mean to countries like Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania? What does that mean to those countries?
Like, I think there are more...
Like, what signal does it send to the Russians? Does that make it sound like that Trump really cares about NATO, or that it's like an aesthetic flourish that he's willing to, give up for the right price? And even if that isn't the case, is that how the Russians are going to see it? Because if the Russians want to be hopeful and see an opportunity, they might just see it, whether the opportunity exists or not. Whether it was just Trump trying to squeeze out a few more dollars by using some hardball negotiating tactics, the Russians might not know that.
Or diplomatic ways to pursue those conversations.
He never ever once said he was going to pull out forces. You just make stuff up, Stephen. You've got to stop it. Like there was hot fighting.
So focus
in
on the issue. Come on.
No. This is important.
Give us the facts.
Because this is
an area where you can win if you want. Tactics. So give us the facts.
This is tactics. He just floods the zone with stuff that's false.
Let's address this.
Let's talk about it.
We can go claim by claim if you want.
Well, that's what I'd like Seb to do. That's what I'd like Seb to do.
When we were in the White House, and you know this, as opposed to what Obama did, Obama, after the invasion of Crimea, the jewel of Ukraine stolen, what did Obama do? He sent blankets and night vision devices. If you don't believe...
That is pathetic, and I do agree that was pathetic. It was Biden, it was the Obama administration trying to continue the magic button press of the restart in relations. It was 2014. It was midterm season. So I think there was probably also a obvious political element of, do you want to possibly even threaten to tie up American troops anywhere during an election season where American troop deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan are not nearly as popular as they used to be?
Believe me, look it up. Blankets and night vision devices. When we came in, I don't understand this.
But by the way, the Trump administration followed the same policy until Congress made them act.
Stephen's positing that we should have invaded?
I've never said that.
Oh, well, there was land in Ukraine that the Russians controlled, and Trump didn't do anything about it.
Trump followed the same policy as Obama until Congress made him send aid. It wasn't even made him. It was Congress passed veto-proof legislation. Then Trump tried to block it up. And then when it's eventually passed because he couldn't have done anything to stop it anyway, he takes credit for it, and Trump supporters take credit for it as if he's the savior of Ukraine.
What? You want intervention? I didn't know you were a neocon, Steve.
What is this idea that anytime America flexes its influence on the world stage, that translates into neoconservatism? Is neoconservatism just when America projects strength? Is that what neoconservatism is? I thought it was a concrete set of ideologies, and neoconservatism, not America strong-ish anywhere. Whatever.
When we got into the White House, did I say that we should invade anybody?
You said that Trump did nothing about the land taken by Russia.
I said that
he did. Yeah, he didn't push them on it. It's not like we're going to implement a ton more sanctions. We're going to do this all on this issue to make you know that this is unacceptable. And the longer you hold on to it, the harder it's going to be for you. The longer you wait until you come to a settlement, the worse it's going to be to you. He didn't make a big shift on that issue. No, he didn't do what I would have wanted him to do looking back.
Russia didn't run away from Crimea. They didn't fear.
And you
Russia
said the operations were continuing. Garbage. There were no military operations in Crimea, in Ukraine, or on the border.
Crimea was captured. The whole thing is a military operation.
There were no military. Constantine is right. There was no hot war. You're just making stuff up. When we came into the White House, we deployed Javelin shoulder-launched anti-tank weapons to Ukraine.
Congress sent it after Trump delayed its shipment to Ukraine.
So they could defend themselves. And for 4 years, it's interesting, the diminutive KGB colonel did nothing. The idea that, I'm going to kind of explain away what happened in Afghanistan.
But again, the idea that the reason why Putin didn't invade during Trump's term was because of Trump puts a lot of power in Trump that should not be assumed. It really should not be assumed. It could have just been that Vladimir Putin, getting older, now 70 years old, looking towards trying to conclude his legacy. It could be that. It could be that they saw, with time and effort and investment, that the Ukrainian armed forces was improving, and so it's better to go sooner rather than later and wait for it to get to a quality that could stop them. And they just undershot it. And they should have done it much, much, much sooner. No, they overshot it, and they should have done it much, much, much sooner if that was the reason. It could be any number of factors that motivated them to do it. Ideological factors, obvious ideological factors from Putin's hardcore Russian nationalism. I mean, the idea that we could just place this all at who is the American president at this specific time, I think places way too much power in the hands of the president.
Let's break Afghanistan down for a second. Yes, there was a timetable for President Trump, but it was conditions-based. If the Taliban hadn't met those conditions, there would have been no withdrawal. I was part of those negotiations. Let me tell you, there would have been no withdrawal without those conditions having been met. Instead, because he wants a photo op for the...
Wait, so is Sebastian Gorka's official position that we should have stayed in Afghanistan? We should have said... We don't believe that the conditions for withdrawal are met, which is what I believe he's suggesting. And so we're going to stay, even if that risks open war again with now the Taliban and ISIS in Afghanistan, which the American people don't have the stomach for. No one generally has the stomach for, either political will or the blood will to continue this war. I just want to hear Sebastian say that we should have stayed in Afghanistan for another 4 years.
Anniversary of 9/11. I mean, what a cynical. Biden wants an anniversary, 20th anniversary photo op that I won the war in Afghanistan. So
you cannot complain about photo ops as a Trump simp. You can't. It's just impossible. You can't do it.
13 of our servicemen are murdered by ISIS at Kabul airport. Thousands of Afghans, also our interpreters, are left. You see a plane take off with hundreds of people hanging on.
I'm sure that Trump's main priority would have been getting sure to get as many Afghan refugees into the United States as possible. I'm sure. Now, to be clear, we should have gotten more people out. The withdrawal, I think, should have been better organized. But the idea that Trump was the person to do that organizing is ridiculous. If there's anyone in the world I would trust less, it would be Donald Trump.
On the fuselage. And how do they leave? Oh, we're going to get the military
I don't know.
out.
Maybe if this was like Bush Senior, you know, and I'd be like, oh, well, maybe you have a point here. This is Bush Senior after all. But no, this is Donald Trump. Get out of here.
And then we'll somehow get out the civilians. The rank dilettantism for the photo op that you don't even leave from Bagram, which is a military air base you can actually defend. You go to KIA in Kabul, indefensible, and you have a complete circus, well, not a circus, a tragedy of a surrender. And then Putin goes, oh.
We disconnected again. We had another crash. So we had one crash at the start of stream due to a blue screen and power outages. Then a second crash because of power outages, and then a third crash because of power outages. Isn't that beautiful? Gorka thinks you're making it. No, Gorka thinks you're making it up. I think we end the stream here. I don't think there's any reason for me to keep this going at this rate with all the crashes. But I do gotta say that the Gorka Destiny debate does degenerate further. I've seen where it goes from there. I've seen that eventually, like Gorka says that Destiny is behaving in blood libel and that it gets even more toxic. But I mean, I already saw like an hour of the debate. There was only 30 minutes left, and I don't think that the tempo or the style of the debate was going to change that much. My general judgment of this is that I now have less of an opinion of Sebastian Gorka than I did the last time I saw him have a conversation, and it was about BDS, and he just did terrible defending his commitment to the First Amendment while also standing with anti-BDS laws that kind of went against those principles. And I just found him to be performative then, and now I find him to be more performative than ever. Every single interaction here didn't feel genuine. Every single interaction felt like it was a performance. Oh, Joe Biden's the biggest human trafficker in the world. Joe Biden hates America, and that's a statistical fact. Like, all of this was performance. All of this was for the crowd. All of this was meant to demonize that, and that's it. End of period. End of paragraph. I didn't find anything in there that felt like a real human being giving me their genuine opinion. It felt like at every point it was just a suit talking to me. Just like a less charming suit than usual. But I mean, he is a Trump politician. He is a MAGA politician. So I don't know what I expected. It's just I got a particularly greasy handshake today in the form of a debate.